Mihir Doshi, thanks for joining us. How are things shaping up for India? We're back in terms of the market about 20,000. That's once again after going below.
Yeah, so I guess if that's the barometer you're asking me on how India is shaping up, it's looking all right. I think we had our bit of a correction from the 21,000. Having said that, I think it's been fairly volatile even at these levels. But net 10, I think the hope is that once it does stabilize, we make a stab at it next year. I think going to the end of the year, this is basically where we're going to end up.
But is volatility equaling opportunity even in these markets?
I think so. I think if you believe in the underlying story, and you do believe that for whatever reason there's a correction, maybe for a potential scandal, a potential scam, whatever, and if it does provide an opportunity, yes, I think that will be, so volatility will bring an opportunity for people to...
What are going to be the comeback sectors or the driving sectors here on? We've seen auto do extremely well, but it looks like it's sort of waning off a tad because of high sales going down.
Well, this last month was lower than October, but I still do believe that that's a sector which will do well going to next year, and I think we as a house are that's one of the sectors we are overweight on. Sectors which I personally am of an opinion which will do well next year, and in general am optimistic, along with our house view, I would say is infrastructure. Still remain positive for that. I think we'll only see that continue to grow. I think the telecom story, I think we've seen a fair bit of, I guess, a fear because of the multiple entrants, and we've seen stocks get beaten down. Our belief is that with the opportunity it provides you to buy into it, I think we're optimistic on the telecom sector going into next year.
So the scandals have actually brought down the pricing and made it attractive.
Made it attractive. So you've seen that, for example, you take the Bharti stock, for example, it got beaten down, I think 15-20%, and it's come back up. But I think that's just from a perspective of a short term, but even from a longer term perspective, our belief is that if there is consolidation, and I presume there will be, I think the stronger players will remain in vogue, and stocks will be attractive. So I think infrastructure, telecom, capital goods. If you believe in infra, you believe in India, you need to believe in the capital goods sector. And
but I've been curious, as you talk about infrastructure, now we did notice that 2010 saw them go out of fashion for a little while, especially during the comeback story when autos were leading this rally. Do you think that the whole execution delay issue will remain, or will it actually now see the execution happen?
Yeah, so you go back and just think about India in general. We always know what needs to get done. That's very clear. I think it's always been about execution. I mean, that's our biggest risk across anything which we want to get done in this country has been about execution.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. So if infra did lag this year, possibly the fear was if you wanted to do 20 kilometers of roads, we've only done 10 to 12 kilometers of roads a day. And therefore, okay, we've had an execution delay. My belief is, yes, I think we will, and I'm not saying we're going to all of a sudden go from 12 to 20 in a heartbeat, in one heartbeat. It is going to take time. But probably if you overcome some of the execution issues, the stocks will come back in vogue. But at the end of the day, that is a fear which I do have.
But it's also a broad pack, isn't it? It's got power, it's got, well, within power, distribution, transmission, and a whole lot, generation, and then you've got
but that again is about, and that again is about execution.
Right.
At the end of the day, if you look at all the power stocks which have either IPO'd or actually are already listed and how they performed, the fear, clearly the investors differentiating between the ones who will and are executing versus the ones who are struggling or it's more of a paper plan and haven't delivered yet. So ultimately it's going to come to execution, and you're right, within infra it's power, it's ports, which again is a story which will play out over the next few years. It's roads. I think those are 2-3 sectors, parts of infra which I think will be the key sectors.
How hot are you on resources? Because somewhere in that infrastructure story, we've got the whole Coal India piece, which had a great debut, but it's now beginning to look a little bit of a struggle. And then we are talking about many others in that space, whether it's iron ore or some of the other coal companies. Are you interested in that space, the resources?
Yeah, as a house, again, we are. I think we are very, very optimistic on the coal story for India. And I think it's a cyclical thing. I think, yes, it had a hot debut. I think probably amongst the better debuts of a large cap of this nature. Leave aside the small caps. So, am I surprised with the bit of stabilized at these prices? Probably, I'm not that surprised. But we are. I think from a longer term perspective, resources have to play an important role in India's growth also.
Are you at any point worried about the valuations? We always look at India among
Overall?
the emerging market pack, and there's always this tendency to say that India is slightly expensive. But then there are those who say that let's just get used to this expensive situation.
So you know, as you know, I'm not often in the press, and every time I have been, this question is asked of me, what I think of the valuations. I think a few months ago I'd said it looked a bit expensive at 18,000. I could see a correction coming in, and I was proven wrong. I think there's a balance between valuation versus liquidity. I think from a valuation perspective, probably it is a bit rich. I think we can see a correction, and I think that's what we were seeing in this market coming off. But from a liquidity perspective, I still remain optimistic. So from a year end for 2011, I think we see the markets going up. I see it going up, but I would not be surprised if there is a correction on the back of valuation.
So on that account, you would always be a buyer in the correction?
Net, I would be a buyer, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think the macro story on India, and I'm not saying this because I'm trying to sell India to somebody. I am.
Well, actually, you are most of the time.
I am. Well, no, that's not true. I mean, I've been back in this country 16 years, and the first 8 years, I used to question why I was here. So, and even though it is my business to be selling India and selling stocks to people, I have not been as positive as I am now in the last 7-8 years. I think since 03, 04, and I know it coincides with the stock market going up, I think my optimism is newfound. I wasn't as optimistic before.
Okay, so hopefully that won't be too cyclical. But to get a sense from you, since you touched upon this whole, global story and markets could be looking good in 2011, is some of it connected with the quantitative easing part too? Are you expecting that to cheer up the markets going ahead?
I think there's both on that count, right? I think the QE2 in the US probably signals, I think kind of a bottoming out of even the US economy in terms of, I think the worst is behind them, we hope. If that does grow, that bodes well in general for the global economy. And of course, the liquidity which the QE2 has provided is the one also fueling emerging market money coming in. So I think it's, net, yes, I do believe that things will be better across the globe. As a house, our expectation is that the world will be a better place next year.
Okay, and that slight recovery in the US could actually help the emerging market story.
Yeah, so, it's on one hand, we talk about the QE2 money, liquidity driving it, and staying out of the US. My perspective is from my overall trade and economy perspective, the US doing better is better for all of us. And
it's probably likely to better Europe, given the state of some of the countries in Europe currently?
Probably. I would say, if you were to say, compare both US, look at the West and compare US versus Europe, yes, I think US probably will benefit. And I think.
How concerned are you, though, in the short term about the situation in Europe? Barring Germany, I'm looking at most of the other economies now in a bit of a rethink.
I think Ireland was the most recent example, and over the last 9 months we've seen, Greece be an issue, to an extent Portugal, Spain. Our expectation is this is not something which is going to get like a domino effect, going to impact the others. So, obviously we are concerned, but as a house, again, we don't believe that this is the start of something really big.
Do you expect at least one country to default in Europe, or is that a fear that you're keeping aside?
That's a fear which actually we don't hold. Me personally, or as a house, we're not.
Any fallout on the currencies that could have an impact? I mean, look at the state of euro now.
Yeah, so the euro has been extremely volatile. Trading went up to 1.4 to the dollar, and now it's back down to 1.3, 1.32. Yeah, I think depending on how bad it gets, the euro does get impacted. But I think again, if I do prescribe the theory that it's not going to be really bad, I think the euro probably will not be buffeted as badly as it has been.
Talk about banking. Your sector has been doing pretty well, both on the stock markets and otherwise. Would you be a buyer on the banking side?
In India?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I think financial services in the long run, again, I'm very optimistic. That's if there's another sector which I would say we are optimistic on, I personally am optimistic on. Yes, I think I continue to remain optimistic from a longer term perspective.
Okay, in RBI's eyes, it's time now to consolidate, and yet it wants to give out some new banking licenses. Do you think this is a good approach to a sector in India which has been better off than the rest of the world in terms of crisis management?
Yeah, so I think the RBI has done a fabulous job in terms of crisis management since the last 3 years, right? Last 2 years. I think when the RBI is looking for consolidation versus also giving out licenses, for some of the new players. We're one of them, which we got a license this year. I think they're looking at two things. A, the new licenses are clearly going to be given in the context of RBI's desire to ensure that banking spreads across the country. Yeah. I think financial inclusion is their mantra, and rightfully so. We clearly are underbanked in rural India. So I think even when they give the licenses, it's going to be to players who can actually somehow expand across India. And so I think that's the reason they want to do that. I think from a consolidation perspective, if that's what RBI is going to push for, I think it's, again, the really smaller players probably don't have the scale to grow. Yeah. And that's the reason to drive them to consolidate.
But are you optimistic that a large number of corporations are in the queue for this banking license?
Supposedly.
Yes, well, to a great extent. Yeah, they've been well known in terms of their intentions. Yes. Is there a chance, you think, as a banker, that this will actually materialize?
I should plead the fifth on that question and pass. I don't think the RBI or First Minister of Finance or the RBI would go down the path of this far without wanting to somehow actually put this to work. Now, what the processes are, what the criteria are, we still don't know.
So then you're optimistic about it?
Yeah. I don't think this is just a paper which has been floated to meet somebody's fancy. I think this is genuinely, and I think this again goes back to finding out, are there institutions which can actually help their desire to expand across the country from a financial inclusion perspective.
With lots of caveats attached, I imagine.
And depending who gets it.